Broadcasting from the ARN Racing Studios in Southern California, a turn for media company, ARN Los Angeles. This is ARN, the American Racing Network, the Motorsports Authority. Now,
drivers, start your engine!
You're shifting gears on ARN with Alan Bailey.
Well, there goes the neighborhood.
You name it, we got it. NASCAR.
Kyle Busch, the 2015 NASCAR Sprint Cup champion.
Yeah, you guys are awesome!
IndyCar.
Scott Dixon not only wins in Sonoma, but wins the 2015 championship.
We win on the tiebreak.
Incredible performance.
Drag racing.
Pop the corks, Antron Brown is the champion for the second time in his career.
Supercross.
Ryan Dungy becomes the 2015 Monster Energy AMA Supercross champion.
And so much more. So get ready. You're shifting gears on ARN with Alan Bailey.
Were you in Atlanta this weekend? Because I wasn't, so don't just stop rubbing it in. Seriously. Welcome on into Shifting Gears right here on the American Racing Network. I'm Alan Bailey. You can get me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at the Alan Bailey. Or you can also use the hashtag ARNRace in order to join the conversation today. It is Shifting Gears number 309 on Wednesday, March 2nd, 2016. Welcome on in, Gearheads, because we have a lot to cover over the course of the next hour. NASCAR was in Atlanta, triple-header weekend out there that saw Jimmy Johnson kind of put his own little footnote in the sport that frankly upset a couple of you. I got the emails. I saw them loud and clear. We'll kind of go through that a little bit because that was it's an achievement nevertheless, but a lot of you are very unhappy with it. Drag racing, which happened to be in Phoenix over the weekend, saw Leah Pritchett get her first win in the first female final in Top Fuel that we've seen since 1982, which, by the way, was pretty darn impressive. Brittany Force going head-to-head with Leah in the final. She lost to Leah. We'll talk about that. Dungy was on fire again out at the Georgia Dome in Atlanta, which also saw some interesting headlines. We'll get you an update on some of the riders who got hurt out there. Plus, Clint Boyer face planting in Supercross on Saturday night. Yeah, the video is, I don't want to say amazing, but yeah, it's kind of cool. I enjoyed it thoroughly. I'm kind of sad to say. I enjoyed it a little too much. I'll admit that. Getting ahead of ourselves, let's kick things off with today's Hot Topics. Jimmy Johnson winning in Atlanta over the weekend in the Sprint Cup Series. Not only was it his first victory of the 2016 season, but it was his 76th victory, which ties Dale Earnhardt Sr. for most wins all time. Johnson attempted to do a donut of a 3 in the infield at the Atlanta Motor Speedway, and on the victory lap, holding 3 fingers out the window as a salute to the Intimidator. NASCAR confiscated some parts from the RCR Cup cars after Sunday's race in Atlanta. No word from NASCAR on penalties. We expect an announcement at any moment. Matt Kenseth was penalized, but a lot of people are very confused as to why he was penalized and what he even did wrong. We'll break it on down later in this hour. Plus, Brian France making some headlines, appearing at a Donald Trump rally with a handful of drivers from the Sprint Cup Series, and it did spark a little backlash as Camping World CEO said that he is not happy with France, but he will not seek to revoke his sponsorship of the Camping World Truck Series early due to Brian France's actions. Camping World CEO does not like Donald Trump, and that is apparent as we'll discuss it on the program later today. There's a new tire combo that's ready to take to the track this weekend at the Las Vegas Motor Speedway, not only for NASCAR Xfinity, but also NASCAR Sprint Cup Series racing for the second week in a row. The NASCAR Sprint Cup Series will have a new tire combo. How will that affect the cars, and what is the downforce package looking like for this weekend? We'll get into it. Leah Pritchett winning in Top Fuel. Also, Tom Wilkerson and Jason Line winning in their respective series out in Phoenix this last weekend. We'll get into it. Ryan Dungy capping off his 5th victory of the 2016 season out at the Georgia Dome over the weekend. We'll have an update for you as well this hour on Will Hahn, Short, and Nicoletti, as all three riders were hurt this last weekend out in Atlanta. Plus, Clint Boyer won the NASCAR Supercross Hole Shot Challenge, but unfortunately, things didn't end exactly how we wanted it to. After crossing the start-finish line, Boyer went head first into a tough block and into the wall. Very harsh video to watch, but he got up and he was okay. He did race on Sunday, the complete race in his car. Now, Phoenix testing notes from this last weekend. We saw the IndyCar Series take to the Phoenix International Raceway, as they'll be racing there later this year. And we saw some interesting results. We'll take you out to Phoenix to hear from some of the drivers on that one. Plus, the Phoenix test also confirmed that Sebastian Bourdais is going to be back in the number 11 KBSH Hydroxy-Cut car for the 2016 season. We saw him testing that car, and we got confirmation from the team that he'll be back in that car for the full 2016 season. Plus, Chevy unveiled the Corvette Grand Sport Edition this week. The photos and the review are up on arnrace.com. From the ARN News Desk, I'm Alan Bailey, and that's your Hot Topics for Wednesday, March 2nd, 2016. And as NASCAR goes west, lots of stuff to talk about, not only with everything that we're going to see on track for the next 3 weeks for the NASCAR circuit. This weekend, they will be out at the Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Next weekend, they're going to be at the Phoenix International Raceway, and they're capping off their West Coast tour on March 20th at the Auto Club Raceway out here in Fontana, California, Southern California. And we're going to talk about it because there's a lot of logistics that need to go in. It's not just, okay, pack the trailers up and, oh, by the way, get ready to haul to the other side of the country. Effectively, the haulers are here for the next month, realistically. And that's somewhat of an issue, to be frank. Pretty much we're going from now until Easter Sunday. We are going from now till Easter Sunday as far as NASCAR is concerned. Next weekend, Indy's going to be at St. Petersburg. We'll talk about that. Supercross is in Daytona this weekend. Off weekend for the NHRA for the next few weeks, but they're getting ready for Gainesville on the 18th, 19th, and 20th of this month. So we'll kind of mention that. We'll work that into the program a little bit later on in this hour as well. Lots of stuff to talk about. Lots of reactions to Jimmy Johnson claiming his 76th career victory out at the Atlanta Motor Speedway over the weekend. It did tie Dale Earnhardt Sr., and a lot of you are not happy about that, and I don't understand why. The man, unfortunately, is no longer with us. He is a legend in this sport. There is no questioning that. He is a Hall of Famer. He is a Hall of Fame member. And what he accomplished in our series is undeniably amazing. However, he unfortunately left us in 2001. It is 2016. His records, I'm sorry, were meant to be broken, and they weren't exactly the best records in all of NASCAR. Richard Petty holds that one, which is why he also, unfortunately, holds the King's title, the King nickname. And if you've listened to this program more than once, you know I absolutely hate calling Richard Petty the King, because I'm sorry, he's not the king to me. He's really not. He had the most money when he had the most money and the best team back when NASCAR was starting out, and back when NASCAR unfortunately didn't have a whole lot of funded teams. They were more or less guys who ultimately were doing it out of their garage with the family station wagon. Richard Petty and Petty Motorsports had a team. Of course they were going to go out there and win all the races when most of the field doesn't show up to all of the races. This was back in an era when NASCAR was racing 2, 3, 4 times a week in different states, and only a handful of cars would show up. But since Richard Petty won most of those races, guess what? He's still the king. I'm sorry. He's the rich guy who went out there and kicked everybody's butts who didn't have a third of the car he had back in the day. So to me, he was just the rich guy who, frankly, bought all of his wins. And NASCAR gave him the name, NASCAR Nation gave him the name the King because, well, he bought all the wins. Whoop-de-doo. And then as soon as competition showed up, he didn't win any races. NASCAR had to come up with new fancy rules like the Champions Provisional, which should be called the Petty Provisional, because Richard Petty couldn't qualify for a darn race because he wasn't fast enough. Wasn't good. His talent, or lack thereof, finally showed through, and his true colors did fly, so NASCAR had to come up with all these rules and regulations and things that would allow their king to be allowed to race on Sunday. Excuse me, feel the field. That's more appropriate. Yeah, I'm going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Jimmy Johnson's place in NASCAR history and where he ranks with Dale Earnhardt, who I think is the real king, and that other petty guy. And we will also talk about everything that happened out in Phoenix this last weekend, not only with the test that we saw for IndyCar out there. They're going to be in Phoenix in a few, actually next month, for their race out there. First race in a very long time on a new track, I should say. We're also going to talk about everything that happened out in Atlanta, both with NASCAR and with Supercross, and with NHRA out in Phoenix as well. What are the odds that we saw 4 different series essentially in 2 cities? That's pretty darn impressive in my books. Plus, we'll talk about the NASCAR Goes West Tour, your reactions. Alan at AmericanRacingNetwork.com is the email address if you want to do that. You can also Facebook, Twitter, Instagram me at the Alan Bailey. Also use the hashtag ARNRace. And I do want to remind you the phone number is 720-600-RACE. That is 720-600-7223. Standard message and data rates do apply on that one. We'll try to work in a messenger here or there. We saw some come in over the weekend, and if there's any good ones, maybe we'll leave them. I want to hear what you have to say. Get fired up. Call that number, 720-600-7223. That is 720-600-RACE. Standard message, data rates apply. Don't get mad when they bill you. Apparently, when you make a phone call, they send you a bill. Who would have thought that? Groundbreaking information here on Shifting Gears. Do yourself a favor. Don't go anywhere. You're shifting gears right here on ARN, the Motorsports Authority.
Take ARN anywhere. Download your favorite ARN programs on iTunes. Keyword search ARN and listen online at arnrace.com.
Any Napa guy knows, and science proves, the best minivan is the one you've already got. Part kid transporter, part drywall mover. Who cares if the faux wood grain is a little faded? That was a platinum package option in 1987. With over 400,000 parts and a little Napa know-how, you can keep anything on the road. Because it's not old, it's vintage. That's Napa know-how.
You must have thrown 1,000 pitches teaching him to hit a home run. Spent countless Saturdays running routes so he could learn to hit an open receiver. Endless afternoons teaching him how to hit the three-pointer. But how much time have you spent teaching him what not to hit? Teaching boys that all violence against women is wrong is one of the most important things a man can do. Learn how to start the conversation at teachearly.org. Brought to you by Futures Without Violence and the Ad Council.
You're shifting gears on ARN. Here's Alan Bailey.
Did you enjoy the racing out in the Georgia Dome this weekend? Yeah, we saw Ryan Dungy pick up his 5th win, and he's on his way to his inevitable, championship 2nd year in a row. There's no denying that. At least in my mind, there's no denying that. But I want to know, did you enjoy the racing? At the Alan Bailey Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, where you can send me things like, seriously, can we just give Dungy the trophy now and call it a season? Hashtag, I'm over it. That one came from Gear Grinder 72, and I do agree. Listen, I'm not saying that he's locked it up. Far from it. Mathematically speaking, realistically speaking, no, he hasn't. And not that I'm wishing this upon anybody, but Dungy, realistically speaking, could get hurt, and he could, in theory, not continue after a certain point, and then KTM and Red Bull give up a 2nd championship in a row, at least with Dungy, and then that's that. But the fact of the matter is, that's not the reality we're living in at this time. KTM finished 1-2, first time since the start of the 2014 season that they did that. Chad Reed also finishing on the podium out there, which I thought was very cool indeed. And maybe I'm a nostalgic. Maybe I want to see Chad Reed go through another championship season. Maybe I want to see him get another win with a team that he started out with. I don't know, but I thought it was very cool. That he went out there and actually, had a really good ride going. Obviously, Dungy's going to continue to lead the 450 class right now. That's obvious. You look at the championship standings right now, kind of a hefty margin right now. Right now, 32, 33, 30-something points separates Dungy from Roxon right now. And Jason Anderson third right now, but he's a good almost 50 points out of it right now. So it is going to take a bad finish, maybe even a DNF from Dungy, and a win from Roxon on the same weekend for Roxon to realistically catch up, I think. It's still possible. It really is, but it's highly unlikely at this point, and that's what we have to realize and we have to face. Out in the 250 East, Marvin Davalos from Florida on the Husqvarna actually won, and Malcolm Stewart coming home second, and Aaron Bleshgerter coming home third right there. And obviously it's the 250 East first race of the season, so that is more or less your point standing still at this point. So realistically, you have to sit there and figure, what can anybody dethrone Dungy, quote unquote. Ooh, what about Dungy? Ooh, I don't know. I don't think that Roxon can do it. You look at Roxon; he finished sixth this weekend. You can't do that. He gave up valuable points, very valuable points. He lost ground on Dungy this weekend. He needs to finish top three every single week. Dungy, if he wants to preserve this, has to finish on the podium every single week. And that's what Dungy's been doing since the start of the season. It's what he did last year. It's how he won it last year. And it's what we're seeing. It's the trend we're seeing. Now, will it continue over the long haul? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I'm not a mind reader. But I tend to believe that Dungy's going to win this championship again. KTM is extraordinarily strong, and they continue to make small improvements to get better. That's what you have to do in order to realistically contend for a championship and continue to thrive in a championship, and that's why Dungy's doing what he's doing right now. I'll say this, though. Out in the Georgia Dome, bit of a clay kind of track. It's got that kind of clay kind of quality. I gotta say, could it have gotten any ruddier? You look at photos from the race, extremely ruddy. There was a couple of jumps that realistically, the tires were so buried I couldn't even see them going through some of those jumps. There's a photo of Tomac where he's going through one of the jumps, and honestly, his foot, which is on the peg, mind you, is basically touching the ground, and he's going through one of the ruts. Ay. I mean, I'm not giving flack to the crew, to the Supercross track crew, because they honestly do a fabulous job. I'm just saying that maybe, just maybe, they should have done a little bit better maintenance between races on a certain handful of jumps. Maybe, yeah, maybe a little bit of maintenance would have been nice. Would have been really nice. Just saying, it would have been really cool. You know what was really cool though? Seeing some NASCAR stars go out there and kick some butt on some Supercross bikes. It was really cool. You had the 3 of Austin Dillon, the 16 of Greg Biffle, the 17 of Ricky Stenhouse Jr., and the 15 of Clint Boyer, all on bikes, which was just so darn cool, as it was. And you saw him do a race, and ultimately Boyer had a bit of a hard time with it, let's just say. They went down there. It was this really cool event that they did, this whole shot challenge that they did, and they did it on Saturday. Boyer won the race. He edged out Biffle to win the challenge. However, he kept going. He was going so hard, he didn't really stop, and he basically went headfirst into the tough blocks on the wall there, and it was a very violent hit, to say the least. You saw Danica Patrick holding up the 30 sign. She really didn't want to do it, I guess, if that's what you want to call it, and Boyer just kept going, tried to make the turn, went through the jump, and went headfirst into the Parts Unlimited tough block that was up against the wall, and he immediately stands up and gives Dylan like a "come at me, bro" kind of thing, and takes his glasses off, but he was fine. He was perfectly fine. He got up and he was just fine, and he made some funny remarks on the Fox broadcast on Fox Sports 1 after
I've wrecked plenty of times on a motorcycle. I tell you, I was having trouble when I started. I got a 450 at home, and this thing 250 was bogging a little bit, so I started in first, and I knew I didn't get a good very jump, but I was committed, man. You got to get down to the end and beat them across the line. And then I knew I wasn't going to make the corner, and I was aiming for that tough block. I knew it was going to be soft, a good place to land.
Okay.
I'll give him this. He was going full out. Everybody else they got to a certain point on the track and they knew, oh, okay, I got to slow down right before the line so I can make the turn. And Boyer just kept going. And to his credit, that's what fans like. And that's what he did, going kamikaze status down through there. Now, he was fine. However, we saw some other riders go through some pretty harsh stuff. In the second heat in 450 on Saturday, we saw a very violent crash between Martin Short, Phil Nicoletti, and Will Hahn that ended with all three receiving medical attention and unable to continue in the race. Here's what we have on them so far. Short provided an update on his Instagram account earlier this week. He put up on Instagram, quote, "Well, I'm pretty banged up from crashing Saturday night in Atlanta. The worst part is getting my second concussion in less than 3 months. It burns. The burns, bruises, and cuts will heal, but injuring my head scares me. I would like to thank Eddie and Dr. Alexander from the Aztec crew for helping with my assistance and medical care. At this point, I don't know when I'll be able to return to racing, but I would like to thank the whole Team BTO sports crew and sponsors for their support. Besides God and family, there is nothing that I love more than being at the races around dirt bikes. Also, really appreciate Cubby for sending me over some sweet photos from the race each and every week." That was that right there was Short, Andrew Short, who is more or less done for, I don't want to say the foreseeable future, but he is realistically not going to be racing this weekend. Or in the near future, probably done for the season. Maybe he'll be back next season. For the start of next season, we don't know. Head injuries, as we know, are different for every single person, and that's just something that everybody has to deal with. What we do know from Joe Gibbs Racing is that Nicoletti is dealing with a banged-up knee. He's undergoing an MRI, or he underwent an MRI on Monday, rather, and the team's optimistic that everything will be okay. No new information out of them at this point. We are still waiting to hear from them, but there's nothing out of that camp as far as the results of that. We'll continue to realistically just keep an eye on them. That's all we realistically can do. And we'll give you the latest on ARNrace.com and on this program if it becomes available to us before we go off the air today. But right now, it doesn't look good. It doesn't look bad. It's just we're waiting and seeing at this point. And Will Hahn went ahead and released an update on his Instagram as well this week. Worst news that we got was from Will Hahn. He sustained a broken collarbone. He released this statement: "Update. Flew straight to Dr. Ting from Atlanta. He was able to pop my shoulder back in, and we also saw that I broke my collarbone, scapula, and tore my labrum. Soon as the swelling goes down, doctor is going to operate on the collarbone and dial in my labrum. I will do everything in my power to be back racing as soon as I can. Thanks to Aztec medical crew for always taking care of us. Hashtag down not out." That was from Will Hahn. He put that on his Instagram earlier this week. He's done as well for more or less the season. Hopefully he'll be back next season. But very brutal indeed. But you know what? It could have been a lot worse. We do wish them all a very speedy recovery. Andrew Short, Phil Nicoletti, and Will Hahn, we do wish you guys a very speedy recovery. Hopefully we'll see you back out at the track very, very soon. Supercross is down in Daytona this weekend. We'll miss you guys out there. We will not see you out there, but hopefully we'll see you guys back very, very soon out in Supercross and maybe in the Outdoor Series Motocross later this year. We'll see you very quickly. Now, as far as everything that's going on this weekend with Supercross, down in Daytona this weekend. It's going to be a really, really, really cool event with everything that has happened to the Daytona International Speedway with the Daytona Rising projects. Very cool to see how the Supercross crowd takes it. We know that Honda's going to be hosting a kickoff party on Friday night out at the racetrack, so that's going to be very cool to see. It's going to be extremely cool to see all these, to see how Supercross takes to the Speedway. We know that the racetrack is going to be on point. It always is. It's always a great show whenever we go down there. It is a cool event down there at the Daytona International Speedway. If you want to check out the track preview, you can head on over to arnrace.com or at arnrace on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The previews are up there, and it looks like an extremely cool racetrack, and all the videos are up there, so you guys can check out the highlights on that, or the preview rather, the 3D rendering preview of the racetrack. It's going to be very, very cool. Now, gonna go ahead and step aside here. When we get back, we are going to continue on a very, very, very action-packed show. Lots of stuff on the calendar for today. Jimmy Johnson won at Atlanta this last weekend, but unfortunately, it came with a bit of controversy. Not with Johnson, not with everything involved with Johnson's win and Chad Knaus drama. Not talking about that, but talking about the fact that he tied the Intimidator for all-time wins, and a lot of Earnhardt Nation, unfortunately, needs to realize it's 2016, and they also need to realize that records were meant to be broken. And why did Chad Knaus not want Jimmy Johnson to do a burnout? Oh, are we going to start Chad Knaus' cheating rumors again? Are we going down that route? I think I can hear the black helicopters overhead. Ooh, no, they're coming for me. Game over. Oh, no. Do yourself a favor. Don't go anywhere. You're shifting gears right here on ARN.
Sick of bad race coverage or none at all from those other networks? Make ARN your one and only for all things motorsports. ARN, the Motorsports Authority.
It's the Nerdgasm Podcast.
I want to point this out, though. I think Kylo's getting you're getting a bad rep, Kylo, because he stopped a laser blast midair. He can suck thoughts out of your mind.
Yep.
He doesn't fear anybody.
Yep.
Takes a laser blast from Chewie's weapon.
Yep.
Not afraid to show his face. Approaches his enemies often. Fights while bleeding out in the freezing cold.
Oh, yeah.
And he's labeled a crybaby.
All right.
How is he labeled a crybaby?
The internet has labeled him a crybaby.
You know what?
Oh my gosh.
I'm not the internet. I don't know.
Kylo took a lightsaber to the face.
He did.
And he just gave the death stare. He wasn't crying.
That was blood dripping down his face.
Those weren't tears. That was blood, dude.
Exactly. And if you want to claim that it were tears, then it was clearly the snow all over his face.
Now we can set the record straight.
All right.
So, Kylo, no cry baby.
Download new episodes of the Nerdgasm Podcast every Friday on nerdgasmpodcast.com, on iTunes, and now available on Stitcher.
Geico applauds your inner happy camper. A merit badge of awesomeness goes out to the part of you that wants to put the recreation in recreational vehicle. The part of you that packs up everything and everybody in the RV and says, let's get this show on the road. Because Geico has specialized agents who help save money on more than just car insurance. Geico will insure that entire RV, so you can get the s'more making, poison ivy dodging, same song singing, ghost storytelling, campfire building, best time you ever had with your family show on the road.
Geico for your RV. See how much you could save.
Download and listen to your favorite ARN programs on the go. Download Shifting Gears on arnrace.com, iTunes, and now available on the Stitcher app. ARN, the Motorsports Authority.
You're shifting gears on ARN. Here's Alan Bailey.
Very cool weekend out in the Atlanta area. If you were out in the Atlanta area this weekend and you didn't go to at least 2 of the 4 races that we saw out in the Atlanta area over the weekend, shame on you. You're not a gearhead. Get your head on straight. Crazy head, face. We saw not only Supercross in the Georgia Dome on Saturday, but on Saturday during the day, mind you, we saw Xfinity and Truck Series racing at the Atlanta Motor Speedway. And on Sunday, we had the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series race that happened, and Jimmy Johnson ended up winning that race in not dominant fashion, but in a way that made most people kind of raise an eyebrow, which made me think, well, Why was that a surprise that he won? It's Jimmy Johnson. He went to the racetrack. That means he's got a pretty damn good shot of winning at any given weekend. And we found that out the hard way as we check out the recap from this last weekend out at the Atlanta Motor Speedway.
After Kyle Busch won and then lost the pole after failing post-qualifying inspection, it's going to be his brother, Kurt Busch, who leads the field to green in the Folds of Honor Quick Trip 500. On lap 39, Harvick leads the way for green flag pit stops with a flat right front. Just look at that tire. It was obvious early that Atlanta Motor Speedway would be wearing those babies out the entire race. Lap 119, another round of green flag pit stops, and it's Kenseth who's penalized for improper fueling.
He's going to lay the wrench on the deck lid. Now, if he'd have laid that wrench on the deck lid before he engaged the fuel can, it would have been no harm, no foul.
His crew chief, Jason Ratcliffe, not happy with the call. You can see him arguing with the NASCAR official. The miscommunication is evident as Kenseth and Ratcliffe exchange a few words after the incident.
I'm going to blow a gasket if we were black flag for 5 laps, but nobody doing nothing to tell me to pit.
Oh, we didn't take you to pit because we were arguing the case.
More green flag pit stops on lap 151 bring multiple issues as Casey Mears blows his left front while entering pit road, causing Logano to swerve, sending him into the commitment cone. That'll cost him a commitment line violation. And then it just gets worse for the number 22. He almost hits his Jackman, the Jackman showing some impressive reaction time. Dude's got some hops. The caution comes out on lap 210 for debris, and it was about time because we just witnessed the longest green flag run in the history of Atlanta Motor Speedway. We finally get our first restart of the race. Kevin Harvick is able to hold off Jimmy Johnson's strong run and continues to lead the way. And then, Six Time decides to make things interesting. Johnson gambles by deciding to short pit while running third to have fresh tires earlier than leader Kevin Harvick with just 49 laps to go. Harvick makes a solid attempt to play catch-up with a 48, and it looked as if the Atlanta favorite was about to run away with it when Ryan Newman blows his left rear coming to turn 1 with just 3 laps to go. And we're heading to overtime. Jimmy Johnson opts for the inside line with Harvick to his outside. Harvick spins his tires and gets nudged out of the way by the 18. And then there's a wreck further back in the field, and that gives Johnson his 76th Sprint Cup Series win, tying Hall of Famer Dale Earnhardt.
Had to come by and throw a 3 out the window to pay respect to the man.
Yes, you did, Jimmy, and thank you for that one. That courtesy of our friends over at NASCAR.com. I want to point something out. You look at the race, we're going to talk about the Kenseth penalty because, trust me, we saw a lot of interesting, reactions to that, let's just say. We will talk about that, don't get me wrong. I want to look at Johnson versus Earnhardt for a second. You look at it, they both have 76 wins, but let's break it all down for us here. Now, Johnson got to race win number 76 in only 509 starts. Earnhardt did it in 671 starts. So 170 starts, give or take, less. Not bad. You look at Johnson's top 5s up until this point in his career. 208. You look at Earnhardt, 200 AD. You look at the top 10s. Johnson, 315 top 10 finishes. Earnhardt, 426 top 10 finishes. You look at the polls. Johnson has 34 polls to his name at this point in his career. Earnhardt at this point in his career had 22 polls. Point to Johnson. You look at laps led. Johnson only leading 17,779 laps, while Earnhardt led 25,653 laps. You look at the titles, Jimmy Johnson 6 championships until this point. Earnhardt had his 7th and final championship to this point. And the years, how many seasons did it take Johnson and Earnhardt to get to this point in their careers? Jimmy Johnson only took him 15 years to reach this point in his career, while Earnhardt took 22 years to get to this point in his career. Now, I know Earnhardt Nation, you're going to blow me up. You're going to call me a Chad Knaus loving, Jimmy Johnson loving, Hendrick rooter, and you're going to say that I hate the good old boys. Not the case whatsoever. I loved Earnhardt. Loved watching him race. I loved watching the balls on that guy because he truly had a giant set and didn't care about anything. He was going to do whatever it took to win, and I loved that about the guy. Absolutely loved it. You look at Johnson, he's willing to do the same, but he does play within the rules a little bit better than Earnhardt did, and you can't deny me that fact. But 22 years for Earnhardt, 15 years for Johnson, and frankly, Johnson is competing in a much, much, much harder or much more difficult competition, frankly. The competition is so much more fierce than it was 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago, which is when Earnhardt got most of his success. Now, you look at Earnhardt's career, he didn't win a championship like Petty for the last handful of years of his career. His championship came in the mid-90s and frankly, or the early 90s, and as soon as the kid named Gordon came around, he stopped winning championships. Coincidentally? Maybe? I don't know. You be the judge on that one. But you look at these two drivers, they are great in their own eras. I honestly think that Earnhardt passed the torch on to Gordon, which passed the torch on to Johnson. You think it's a coincidence that as soon as Earnhardt was tearing it up, and then he stopped winning championships the second Jeff Gordon did, and Gordon stopped winning championships the second Johnson did? Yeah, you notice that pattern in NASCAR history? I'm just saying, who's going to take it from Johnson? I don't know. I really don't know. We could see a guy like Kevin Harvick take that mantle. We could see one of the rookies that started this year take that mantle up at some point down the road. I don't know. I really, really don't know. Kyle Busch could take up that mantle. He just won his first championship this last year. But that's beside the point. The point is we're in the middle of an era with Johnson, period. And I think he's earned every single one of those races, whether you agree with it or not. He will pass Jeff Gordon at some point in the near future on the all-time win list. But for now, Earnhardt, unfortunately, is going to keep dropping on that all-time win list. Records were made to be broken. Is any driver ever going to touch the 200th win mark that was set by Richard Petty damn near 30 years ago? I don't really think so. I don't think that record is achievable because, frankly, NASCAR has significantly changed not only the rules, but the way that NASCAR operates. You don't have 10 races a week in 5 states. You have one race a week. You have 38 a year. 2 of them are non-point paying, which don't really count. So that's the restriction we're in, and that's the realistic world that we're living in. I'll say this, Earnhardt and Johnson probably are the two better comparisons because they raced in an era where we more or less saw the same amount of races every single year throughout their careers, more or less. Earnhardt had a little less, a little more some years, and Johnson has been consistent with the 38 marker throughout his entire career. So with that in mind, I do think that these two are a better comparison versus Earnhardt and Petty, or Petty, Earnhardt, Gordon, or anybody else. But also with that in mind, Earnhardt raced more or less for Jeff Gordon's entire career, or for more or less the entire career that he was alive. So that's something you also have to put into consideration. Now, is Johnson better than Earnhardt? Is Earnhardt better than Johnson? I don't really know. I would have loved to see, frankly, an amazing 4-way battle between Earnhardt Sr., Jimmy Johnson, Jeff Gordon, and Richard Petty, while all 4 drivers were in their primes. Earnhardt in the mid-late 80s, Johnson right in the middle of his amazing run with his championships, Gordon in the mid-90s. Would have loved to see Petty in... When was Petty's golden years? I don't even know. Nobody really does because we didn't have a really accurate depiction on when it was. You disagree with me? At the Alan Bailey on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Also, my personal email address for the show, alan@arnrace.com. You can send me junk mail, spam me. I don't care. You can send me stuff like, I agree, Petty was a tool, and I don't think he deserves the recognition of king either. Hashtag tell it like it is. Thank you, Rocket Man. Appreciate that. I don't know if he was a tool, but I'll say this. Petty did get a lot of the good equipment once his father Lee hung it up. I don't know if that's a coincidence necessarily. Cool coincidence? I don't really know. Also, since we're talking NASCAR, I do want to acknowledge the fact we saw Kyle Busch win an Xfinity in Atlanta. The first time he's won an Xfinity race at Atlanta. The first time Joe Gibbs Racing has won an Xfinity race at Atlanta. And John Hunter Nemechek winning in the Truck Series on Saturday as well. And an unsponsored truck, number 8, unsponsored black truck. I'll say this. If I was a company that was interested in sponsoring any program in NASCAR, I would heavily look at John Hunter Nemechek. One, he's qualified for NASCAR's postseason in the NASCAR Camping World Truck Series with the win. 2, he's a very young, up-and-coming driver with already 2 victories under his belt, coincidentally both unsponsored. And 2, he's going to need some sponsorship to get through the NASCAR truck chase later this year. Might want to get on that, any corporation that's looking for some sponsorship. And now that I've gotten up on my soapbox, I can go ahead and climb down for a second and let that percolate. Because that's just something to think about. I'm serious, he's a very, very, very talented driver, to say the very least. And the fact that he doesn't have a sponsor is a little mind-boggling to me, to be very frank. Also in NASCAR, a new tire combination this weekend for Goodyear might throw the teams for some curbs. Cars that were good this last weekend at Atlanta might not necessarily be on point this weekend out in Las Vegas. One, because even though the tracks look extremely similar, they are completely different racetracks altogether. 2, it is a different tire combination. This is the 3rd week in a row that we have a different tire combination. So I think that this is good, because when you have the same tire combos going to most every single week, you're going to see the same set of teams in victory lane, in the top 5, in the top 10, and the same teams struggling every week when you have the same tire combo week in and week out. So the fact that Goodyear's changing it up means a number of things. One, we're going to see teams that were maybe struggling last week maybe do a little bit better with this, because maybe they figured this tire combo out versus last week's. And maybe, just maybe, we'll see a new winner in victory lane, new car qualifying for the chase that we haven't before, which is a great opportunity in the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series. Also in NASCAR Sprint Cup Series, cool piece of a couple of cool notes here. One, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. going to have a new sponsor on his Ford for a handful of races this season. Sonny D going to be on the number 17 Ford Fusion for Ricky Stenhouse Jr. in 5 races this year and 1 race in the NASCAR Xfinity Series later this year for Ricky Stenhouse. This sponsorship not going to be showing up for a number of weeks. Later this summer, actually, is when you're going to be seeing Sonny D on the number 17 car in the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series. And also for Kevin Harvick this weekend, very cool. His management, KHI, is going to be having a very big weekend out in Las Vegas, and I don't mean just on track. I also mean off track. This is something that's very cool. Kevin Harvick manages MMA fighter Misha Tate, who's going to be taking on the UFC Bentoweight title, hoping to take it away from Holly Holm and UFC 196 this weekend out at the MGM this weekend. So Kevin Harvick's KHI management representatives are going to be very much involved in that. So we're going to see Kevin Harvick out at the fights this weekend out at UFC number 196, which I think is going to be pretty cool. It's not often that you get to see that kind of NASCAR mixing with UFC, but it is something that I think is happening more often than not. And am I a fan of UFC? Yeah, I love watching the fights. I think those guys and girls are absolutely brutal, but I don't get to watch that often, unfortunately. So when I catch it, I enjoy the heck out of it, but don't actually get to a lot, unfortunately. Seriously, I would not want to be in a dark alley with any one of those guys, but I wouldn't want them on my side in the case of a fight or something to break out. I definitely want to tag team with one of those fighters, male or female, no matter what. They'll kick your butt no matter what. So going to be interesting to see what happens with Kevin Harvick this weekend in Vegas. Not getting in the fight, but he's going to be at UFC 196 this weekend. Now, we'll go ahead and we'll step aside here for the final time. We're going to talk about a number of things when we get back. Matt Kenseth's penalty going to be coming up. It is something that's been a topic of discussion with the wrench on the deck lid, the fueler, the fueler on the team put it there, and when he put it there was an issue. Going to describe exactly what the issue is on that one. Going to talk about Pomona. Very cool race out there in Pomona, and we're going to let you hear from Leah after her big win in Top Fuel. Second race with that team. She picks off the win, and it also happens to be in an all-female final for the first time since 1982. Very cool. Wilkerson and Jason Line also picking up the win this last weekend. We'll talk about that when we get back. Also going to talk about the IndyCar test that happened out in Phoenix this last weekend. A couple of cool notes that came out of that one. So do yourself a favor. Don't go anywhere. You're shifting gears right here on ARN.
Sick of bad race coverage or none at all from those other networks? Make ARN your one and only for all things motorsports. ARN, the Motorsports Authority.
You must have thrown 1,000 pitches teaching him to hit a home run. Spent countless Saturdays running routes so he could learn to hit an open receiver. Endless afternoons teaching him how to hit the three-pointer. But how much time have you spent teaching him what not to hit? Teaching boys that all violence against women is wrong is one of the most important things a man can do. Learn how to start the conversation at teachearly.org. Brought to you by Futures Without Violence and the Ad Council.
It's the Nerdgasm Podcast.
I want to point this out, though. I think Kylo's getting you're getting a bad rep, Kylo, because he stopped a laser blast midair. He can suck thoughts out of your mind.
Yep.
He doesn't fear anybody.
Yep.
Takes a laser blast from Chewie's weapon.
Yep.
Not afraid to show his face. Approaches his enemies often. Fights while bleeding out in the freezing cold.
Oh, yeah.
And he's labeled a crybaby.
All right.
How is he labeled a crybaby?
The internet has labeled him a crybaby.
You know what?
Oh my god.
I'm not the internet. I don't know.
Kylo took a lightsaber to the face.
He did.
And he just gave the death stare. He wasn't crying.
That was blood dripping down his face.
Those weren't tears. That was blood, dude.
Exactly. And if you want to claim that it were tears, then it was clearly the snow all over his face.
Now we can set the record straight.
All right.
So Kylo, no cry baby.
Download new episodes of the Nerdgasm Podcast every Friday on nerdgasmpodcast.com, on iTunes, and now available on Stitcher.
You're shifting gears on ARN. Here's Alan Bailey.
The Verizon IndyCar Series getting ready to kick off their 2016 season at St. Petersburg next weekend. But this last weekend, we saw the IndyCar drivers take to the Phoenix International Raceway, and a few of them had a chance to sit down and catch up with some of our friends over at IndyCar.com and talk about the Phoenix Tire Test and where they are in the test session.
Oh, it feels great. I mean, we're not upset about where we are on the timesheets. I mean, this is purely a test. Every single other team has run here already, except for us and Foyt. So it just goes to show you that information is so important, and so we're kind of 2 days behind everyone, which is fine. I mean, that's why we're here testing. That's why we got 2 days here, which has been great. And the track is really cool to drive around, and I think. In traffic, it's interesting. We could probably use a little bit more downforce for traffic and some better racing, but I'm really happy with the Honda engine package so far. I think they've made some good strides in the engine there, and we'll just see what happens later.
It's really hard to compare the record. The track's a lot different. You can make an argument that we shouldn't be that fast because it's bigger. The track's technically bigger than it used to be, but at the same time, 1 and 2 is so much rounder, and the surface is just crazy good. So, I'm not so much worried about breaking those records as just making sure we're beating the current competition.
I think the real big loads are coming when you're in qualifying trim. Once you get below sort of a 20-second lap, you really start to feel the G loads. We're over 6G in the corner. which is, we've seen that, plenty of times before, especially at Iowa, which Iowa, it's a longer, load at that high numbers. But I think once you get into the race flow, once you get into your rhythm, yes, it's going to be very physical, but it's not as much, I think, as those two or three laps that you need to pull out in qualifying. It's good to see that people are coming out even just for a test. It's the official test for the opening of the season, but we have a great product. It's just getting people to see it, and as soon as they see it, they're going to love it.
I tell you what, the Indy cars right now, it's a level of speed and grip that is incredible. I mean, the G-forces that we put is above 4, I believe it's 5 Gs. So as you can imagine, it's quite physical and it's fast. It's just fast. You gotta hit your apex pretty precisely. We started the session and we saw the fans coming into the grandstand. It's amazing. That's fantastic for IndyCar, and I hope we're giving them a good show. The cars are so fast, it must be pretty impressive compared to the NASCAR. So it's just a complete different kind of racing, and I think we're going to give them a good show.
Some of the drivers from the Verizon IndyCar Series right there talking about their IndyCar test this last weekend. And you can tell right there by the excitement on their voice that they really are excited about coming to Phoenix and being at Phoenix. And we did see some quote-unquote record speeds being broken with the new rules package and the aero package. That is more or less that was introduced and tweaked a little bit for 2016 from last season. But will it affect what we're seeing out on the racetrack out at Phoenix? Yeah, we're going to see better racing, and that's ultimately what the NHRA wants, what IndyCar wants, and that's what we're going to see. Now, am I necessarily happy that more or less the race that we saw out in the Auto Club Speedway got replaced with the Phoenix race? I'm not 100% happy with that, but frankly, I think it was what the series needed. I didn't want to see another really high-speed, dangerous race out at the Auto Club Speedway. I liked the racing that we had seen out there for the past 2 years leading up to last season's fiasco, and that was not the track's fault. That was not the team's fault. That was just the rule package that IndyCar took to that track, and that's a 200-plus mile-an-hour track, and we saw, frankly, restrictor plate type-ish racing that we see in NASCAR in IndyCar, except the wheels are open, and the slightest touch means that these cars are going sideways and flipping through the air violently, and we did see one car get up and over the air, but nobody was hurt, thank God. But that's what IndyCar didn't need. They needed a kind of a high downforce track that still provided some good speeds, but didn't have necessarily the danger that the Auto Club Speedway had. And Phoenix is that track, and it's the perfect racetrack for IndyCar, I think, because you do have that low downforce package, but the cars just look so cool on this racetrack. We're going to see such great racing out of these cars. I anticipate a really, really, really cool race out of these from the Verizon IndyCar Series when they go to Phoenix next month or later this year, I should say. So keep an eye on those guys because they're going to do a really cool thing, a really cool race when they go to the track on April 2nd, which just so happens to be my birthday. Shameful plug right there. Now, on that note, want to take you out to get the recap that we saw down in drag racing, because my oh my did we see one heck of a race in drag racing. Incredible racing. We saw some great racing in the season opener out in Pomona, and then frankly you kind of went into this last weekend and thought, well, is it gonna live up to the hype? Are we gonna see the same type of racing that we saw in Pomona, in Phoenix? And yeah, we saw that and then some. Here's the guys from the Fox Sports 1 booth recapping everything that happened out in Phoenix this last weekend for the NHRA the NHRA Mellow Yellow Drag Racing Series on Fox Sports 1. Guys, take it away.
Along with Tony Pedregon, I'm Dave Reef. Thanks for tuning us in on NHRA.com for this CarQuest Auto Parts Nationals race report. Just completed a few moments ago, and in Pro Stock for the second consecutive race, it's one of those Ken Black-powered machines, but not Greg Anderson. This time it's his teammate Jason Lime that took care of Chris McGahey, who shrunk that gap on the teams.
Well, the team continued their dominating performance, but what impressed me the most, Jason Line got beat at the Winter Nationals in the final round, came here with a vengeance. What was very impressive was reaction time in the semifinals, reaction time in the final round. He was very motivated for the same thing not to happen again.
Jason Line wins for the 38th time in his career. In Funny Car, it was John Force and Tim Wilkerson. It's sort of a David versus Goliath, but in the end, how about David, who just slew the Goliath? Tim Wilkerson wins for the 19th time in his career.
Well, from the ashes, but you could see the trend with Tim Wilkerson. He was qualifying better and better as every qualifying run went on. During eliminations, he continued to impress with his performance, and he really saved his best run for his last. Both he and John Force were running 277 miles an hour at half track, and Tim Wilkerson, really no big surprise. He's a good racer. He's a smart racer. He's always going to be there.
And how about this for a crazy stat? John Force finishes as a runner-up for the 100th time in his career. There's no other driver that has gone to 100 finals in Funny Car. And in Top Fuel, history was made here. Just for the second time ever, an all-female Top Fuel final between Leah Pritchett and Brittany Force. One of them going to be a first-time winner, just the 16th different female and the 8th one in Top Fuel to do it, and it was Leah.
Well, solid performance. Maybe not in the first round, maybe not in the second round, definitely not in qualifying, but they were able to fix all of their problems, pull together as a team, and really win an impressive final round. For Brittany Force, there are better things ahead. It was a tough loss for that team, losing with a slightly quicker car, but it was hard to imagine the racing was going to get better than Pomona, and I think this race lived up to all those expectations.
Hey, it may be a couple of weeks off before we contest our next national event, one of the majors on the calendar, the Amalie Motor Oil Gator Nationals, as we head to Florida. But keep in mind, you can keep up with all the action. How do you do that? NHRA.com, the place you're at right now.
And that is from the guys over at Fox Sports 1. A recap on the action right there. Dave Riff and Tony Petrion. Thank you, boys, for that recap. Now, lots of cool stuff this last weekend. I cannot take it away. Leah getting the win in Top Fuel. That is so darn cool. And I talk to people all the time, and I get non-race fans into racing, and that's the hardest thing to do sometimes. But frankly, the number one complaint I get from friends and family members who are not into racing, keep in mind there's like 2 family members in like a very large group that are non-race fans. I'm working on it, trust me. But the number one question is, why do we only see guys out there? I always point to drag racing and go, up. Nope, look at all these females out here, kicking ass, taking names. They're really good. And Leah is the latest driver to go ahead and put that win column on her resume. Super cool. Now, Brittany Force, what did I say? She's going to win this year. I told you in our show that where we previewed the season for NHRA and for Pomona a few weeks ago that she's going to win this year. You can hear the confidence in her voice, and it really resonated with me this weekend when we saw her just come up ever so slightly short on getting her first Top Fuel victory. She's going to get a victory later this year. Second time in NHRA competition that it was an all-female final. 1982 was the last time. Leah coming out on top with her first Top Fuel. Congratulations to them. Also, congratulations to Wilkerson and Jason Line for picking up victories in their respected series out there as well this last weekend. And I honestly can't say enough about Leah. It was so cool to see her do that. Now, a couple of other news and notes here before we get out of here. NASCAR goes west. What does that ultimately mean for the teams in the very little time that we have left? It ultimately means that these drivers, it means nothing for the drivers realistically, but what it means ultimately is that when NASCAR goes to Vegas this weekend, to Phoenix next weekend, to California in 2 weeks, the teams, the trailers, the cars are all out here. The haulers essentially went from Atlanta back home and then more or less picked up 3 weeks worth of equipment, tools, food, everything, and jetted out to the West Coast. They're out in Vegas right now. They arrived earlier today. They're going to be driving into the track tomorrow, getting ready for Thursday's practice session for the Xfinity race, the Xfinity series, and then cut practice on Friday. And Thursday, we will also see an open test session with this new rules package and the new tire package for the Sprint Cup Series. It's free to the public, so if you're in the Las Vegas area, you want to stop on by, check out some really cool racing, or some practice sessions, I should say. You can go ahead and drive on into the Las Vegas Motor Speedway, Gates are open, no admission, and I believe the Neon Garage is also open for fans this weekend, or I should say tomorrow, for the test session. Highly encourage it. If you've never been to the Neon Garage at the Las Vegas Motor Speedway, it's one of the best garage areas for the fans in all of professional motorsports. Absolutely phenomenal. You have to go check it out. But what it ultimately means this weekend for the next month here is that these truck drivers, unfortunately, are going to be on the road from now until Easter, basically, and they don't get to come home to North Carolina anytime soon. You're going to see other trucks, third and fourth trucks, essentially carrying out new cars every week to the West Coast, and then taking the old one, or taking last week's cars back. So after after Vegas on Monday, you're going to see teams more or less meet up in a I don't want to say a parking lot somewhere, but more or less in a parking lot somewhere, and take Vegas cars off, and then put Phoenix cars onto the hauler and head to the Phoenix International Raceway, while Vegas cars and Vegas equipment get taken back to the shops in North Carolina on a third and perhaps even fourth hauler. So it's a logistical circus, to say the least, but you have to get through it, and it's a very interesting time, and frankly, the weather out here is phenomenal, even though it's raining this weekend out in California. We're going to get through it so far. What's the weather report look like? Kind of cold, actually, in Vegas this weekend, so who knows? We'll see how it all plays out, but it's going to be some great racing out in Vegas this weekend. The NASCAR Sprint Cup and Xfinity Series taken to the Las Vegas Motor Speedway this weekend for their races on Saturday for Xfinity, Sunday for the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series, Cobalt Tools 400, and guess what? Supercross is heading down to Daytona. They're getting ready for their Supercross race out there this Saturday night as well. Going to be some great racing on Fox Sports 1, Fox, and their respective networks this weekend. So do yourself a favor, find a very comfortable position, or head on out to either the Daytona International Raceway or to the Las Vegas Motor Speedway and check out some really great racing this weekend, because Vegas, when NASCAR goes to Vegas, you see some really great racing. I'm going to be in SoCal this weekend, so for everybody here at the American Racing Network and Shifting Gears, do yourself a favor, log on to ARNrace.com to keep up on the latest information, download podcast interviews, and check out the latest photos and videos, as well as follow us at ARN Race on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For everybody here at ARN, I'm Alan Bailey. See ya at the track.
You've been listening to the American Racing Network, a turn for media company. This is ARN, the Motorsports Authority.